Imagine being forced to leave your home, your land, your roots, simply because of where you were born. Imagine a place where the streets are filled with tension, where every family is impacted by a conflict that has lasted over 70 years. A conflict with deep roots, complex history, and no clear way forward. Today, we're diving into one of the most critical and emotional debates of our time, the Israel-Palestine conflict. It's a topic that sparks intense emotions, generates powerful opinions, and has cost countless lives. But is there hope for peace? Or are we forever stuck in a cycle of violence and mistrust? In this debate, we will explore the history, the root causes, the religion, and the public opinions of both sides. We'll hear powerful perspectives from both Mr. David, who will argue from the Israel side, and Ms. Aisha, who will represent the Palestine viewpoint. And we won't stop there. By the end, we'll look at possible solutions, because while history shapes the present, the future is still in our hands. Stick with us as we uncover the layers of this conflict and ask the question that matters most. Can peace be achieved? But first, let's start where everything began. The history. Mr. David, let's begin with your thoughts.
Thank you, moderator. Before we look at where we are today, we must understand how we got here. History shapes everything. The roots of this conflict go back thousands of years. For Jews, this is not just land, it's their ancestral homeland. As the saying goes, if you don't know where you come from, you'll never know where you're going. In 1948, after centuries of persecution, including the horrors of the Holocaust, Jews were granted the right to return to their historical homeland, and the State of Israel was born. It was a moment of immense joy for the Jewish people, the dream of generations realized. But it was also a moment of immense pain for Palestinians, as they were displaced from their homes. This is the root of the ongoing tension. Israel's creation led to the First Arab-Israeli War, and since then, the conflict has evolved. For us, the issue is clear: Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state in its ancestral land, no matter the opposition. As we say, a house divided against itself cannot stand. We believe that Israel is the rightful heir to this land, and we've worked tirelessly to defend it.
Thank you, Mr. David, and thank you, moderator. The history you describe is indeed painful for both sides. But we cannot ignore the fact that Palestinians were here long before 1948. For us, the Nakba, or catastrophe, is a traumatic memory. When Israel was established, over 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly removed from their homes. They became refugees in their own land, many of whom still live in camps today. A tree cut down grows again, and the Palestinian spirit is resilient. For us, this land is not just a political issue. It's a matter of identity, culture, and survival. The 1967 war marked another key moment when Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza, territories that Palestinians view as their rightful land for a future state. We've heard the story of Israel's creation, but we must also ask, what about the rights of Palestinians? When the heart is broken, the wounds run deep. Our wounds run deep because we have been denied self-determination, denied the right to return to our homes, and denied the right to live with dignity in our homeland.
Thank you both for your perspectives on history. This brings us to a critical question. What are the real causes of this conflict? Is it about land, religion, or even politics? Let's explore this next. Mr. David, we'll begin with you.
Let's start with the most fundamental issue: security. Israel, from its very inception, has been under constant threat. Every time we pull back, whether it's from Gaza or from parts of the West Bank, the result is violence. As we say in Israel, if you want peace, prepare for war. This is a harsh reality we live with. The continued presence of terror groups like Hamas in Gaza, which advocates for Israel's destruction, only deepens our fears. Security is not just about politics, it's about survival. Palestinians claim the land, but they often fail to recognize Israel's right to exist peacefully within secure borders. An eye for an eye will only leave the world blind, says the wise proverb. Israel wants peace, but it cannot compromise on its survival. Every negotiation needs to ensure Israel's security.
While I understand the security concerns, the root cause for Palestinians is the occupation. The West Bank and Gaza are not just pieces of land. They represent our freedom, sovereignty, and dignity. Palestinians have been under Israeli occupation for over 50 years, facing restrictions on movement, limited access to resources, and constant fear. Freedom is the oxygen of the soul, and we, as Palestinians, are suffocating under occupation. Furthermore, the Israeli settlements in the West Bank continue to expand, despite being deemed illegal by the international community. These settlements are not just a physical occupation, they're a symbol of the denial of Palestinian rights. A lion does not concern itself with the opinion of sheep, but for Palestinians, these actions send a loud message. We are not seen as equal. The root cause is clear: the denial of Palestinian rights and sovereignty. Until we address this, the conflict will never end.
Thank you for those powerful points. Clearly, both sides see the conflict through different lenses. Security for one, occupation for the other. The Israel-Palestine conflict has far-reaching consequences, not only for governments, but for ordinary people who are caught in the middle of this ongoing struggle. Families, children, communities. Each day their lives are affected by this conflict. Let's dive into the human cost of this ongoing war. Ms. Aisha, could you start?
Thank you, moderator. The human cost of this conflict is immeasurable. For Palestinians, the trauma is generational. Children are born into conflict, and they live their entire lives under constant threat, unable to imagine peace. Families are divided, dreams are shattered, and futures are uncertain. As the proverb goes, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Our children are growing up in this environment of fear, and with each passing generation, the cycle of anger and pain intensifies. Take Gaza, for example. Over 2 million people living in an area smaller than many major cities, with limited access to clean water, healthcare, and education. The blockade has destroyed the economy, and violence has made life almost unbearable for many. People have lost their homes, their livelihoods, their loved ones. And yet they are resilient. They continue to hope for something better. Even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise, as the famous saying goes. But the reality is, until occupation ends and justice is achieved, this human suffering will continue.
I completely understand the pain and suffering you describe, Ms. Aisha. But let's not forget the human costs on the Israeli side as well. Israeli families live in constant fear of rocket attacks, bombings, and terror. In southern Israel, there are communities where children grow up knowing that a siren could go off at any moment, forcing them to run for shelter. Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding, said Albert Einstein. But how can there be understanding when fear and hatred dominate both sides? The recent wave of violence in Gaza saw innocent Israeli civilians targeted, including women and children. Every life lost is a tragedy, whether Israeli or Palestinian. In Israel, we mourn the loss of our loved ones just as much as Palestinians mourn theirs. But the difference is that we also mourn the loss of our security, the loss of our ability to live without fear. We all suffer in this conflict, but the reality is that the only way to bring true peace is to guarantee both sides the safety and dignity they deserve.
Thank you for those emotional perspectives. Now we must move to another crucial aspect of this conflict: religion. Religion plays a huge role in both the conflict's history and its present dynamics. Mr. David, let's start with you. What is the role of religion in the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Religion is at the heart of this conflict. For Jews, Israel is not just a nation-state. It's a holy land. Jerusalem holds profound significance. It is home to the Western Wall, the last remaining part of the Second Temple, and a sacred site for Jewish people for thousands of years. As we say, next year in Jerusalem, it's a hope passed down through generations. Israel's founding was a return to the Promised Land, and for us, that is deeply connected to our spiritual heritage. But we must also acknowledge the significance of Jerusalem to Muslims and Christians alike. To divide the land, you must divide the soul, as a wise person once said. The challenge is finding a way to respect each faith's connection to this land, without one overriding the other. It's about tolerance, respect, and understanding. If we can do that, perhaps we can find peace. But it's difficult when religion and politics are so closely tied.
Religion is, of course, central to Palestinian identity, especially in Jerusalem, which is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest sites in Islam. For us, Jerusalem is not just a political city. It's a sacred city that represents our faith, culture, and history. The heart is where the home is, and for Palestinians, Jerusalem is the home of our soul. But the Israeli occupation of East Jerusalem has led to the destruction of Palestinian homes, the harassment of Palestinian worshippers, and the prevention of free access to our holy sites. It is a place of deep religious significance, but the Israeli government's policies have turned it into a battlefield. Religion has undoubtedly made this conflict more complex, but I believe it also holds the key to reconciliation. When two hearts are deeply rooted in love, no power can divide them. And if both sides can recognize the sacredness of this land for all, there might be hope for a shared future.
Religion, then, is both a source of tension and a potential path to healing. Now, let's turn to the opinions of the people. What do Israelis and Palestinians think about peace, and where do they see this conflict going? Mr. David, let's hear your thoughts.
Public opinion in Israel is complicated. Many Israelis, especially those living near Gaza or the West Bank, are tired of living in constant fear. The cost of war is always greater than the cost of peace, and many Israelis long for a peaceful resolution. But there's also deep skepticism. Can we trust the other side? After decades of violence and broken promises, Israelis are hesitant to believe that peace is possible. Yet there is hope. Young Israelis, especially, are more open to dialogue and a future where both peoples live in peace. But for this to happen, it will take time and trust building, and it must come with security guarantees.
Palestinians are equally divided on the issue of peace. There is a strong desire for peace, but the reality is that many feel disillusioned. We have seen failed peace talks and empty promises for years. Hope is the thing with feathers, but many of us are losing our faith in the process. Yet, despite everything, we still believe in a future where justice prevails. The younger generation in Palestine, like in Israel, is increasingly open to peace, but it requires ending occupation and recognizing our right to self-determination. Without justice, there can be no peace, and that's something we cannot forget.
Thank you for your insights. We now turn to the most important question of all, the road to peace. What is the solution to this conflict? Is there any way forward? Let's hear from both of you.
The only solution, in my opinion, is a two-state solution, with both Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. Israel's borders should be secure, and the Palestinian state must be demilitarized. This will ensure that both peoples can live with dignity and safety. It's a long road, but I believe it's the only path to peace. We must also have mutual recognition. Palestinians must recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, and Israel must recognize the Palestinian people's right to live in peace and sovereignty. There is no path to peace. Peace is the path, as Mahatma Gandhi said.
I agree that a two-state solution is ideal, but it must be based on justice and equality. The right to return for Palestinian refugees, the end of Israeli settlements, and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the West Bank are essential elements. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. And without addressing the root causes, occupation, displacement, and inequality, no peace will be meaningful. Only then will we truly have the foundation for a lasting, peaceful solution.
Thank you both. As we approach the end of today's debate, it's clear that both sides have suffered deeply. But there is also hope for a peaceful future, if only we can learn from the past and recognize each other's humanity. We've discussed the historical, human, and religious aspects of the Israel-Palestine conflict. But now let's turn our focus to the global impact. This is not just a regional issue. The consequences of this conflict are felt around the world. From political alignments to humanitarian aid and international relations, the ripple effects are vast. Mr. David, let's start with you. What do you believe is the global impact of this conflict?
Thank you, moderator. The Israel-Palestine conflict has a profound effect on international relations. Many countries have to pick sides, either supporting Israel or Palestine, and that leads to polarization in the global community. The United Nations, for example, has spent decades trying to mediate peace in the region. Multiple resolutions have been passed, but often feels like no real progress is made. Israel's security concerns have led to alliances with Western countries, especially the United States, which is a key player in the Middle East. The U.S. provides military aid, diplomatic support, and technological assistance to Israel, which further entrenches the conflict. On the other side, Palestinian support is often seen in the form of solidarity from Arab countries and other Muslim-majority nations. This division, over time, has turned the conflict into a symbolic struggle for ideological and religious groups worldwide. On a global scale, countries are choosing sides, and it's leading to more divisions between nations. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said. So, when one side is perceived to be unjust, the entire world is affected. This not only influences global politics, but it also shapes trade relations, foreign policy, and international law.
Mr. David makes a valid point about the political implications, but I also want to emphasize the humanitarian impact of the conflict on the world stage. Every time there is an escalation of violence, we see international outcry from human rights organizations, international governments, and citizens worldwide. The world is not just what happens to us, but also what happens to others, as we often say. And when people see suffering, they respond. Palestine has long relied on international aid to provide basic needs like food, water, and healthcare. For instance, UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, supports millions of Palestinian refugees. But that aid is often hampered by the political realities of the conflict. Countries are sometimes reluctant to provide aid or mediate peace because they fear upsetting their political allies. The conflict also impacts global perceptions of the Middle East. The constant violence and instability in the region often leads to negative stereotypes and a lack of understanding of the complexities of the situation. An injury to one is an injury to all. As we know, when one region suffers, the whole world feels the reverberations. The Israel-Palestine conflict is more than just about borders. It's about human dignity, international law, and the right to self-determination. If we cannot resolve this, it sends a message to the world that injustice can prevail, and peace will always be elusive.
Thank you both for those thoughtful points. It's clear that this conflict's global dimensions affect not only international diplomacy, but also human rights advocacy, economic policies, and global security. As you both have pointed out, the alignment of countries, the provision of aid, and the broader perception of the Middle East are all impacted by this ongoing conflict. The stakes are high, not just for Israelis and Palestinians, but for the world as a whole. Ms. Aisha, you mentioned the importance of international solidarity. How do you see the role of the global community in bringing this conflict to a resolution?
The global community must play a crucial role in ending this conflict. The world has the power to hold Israel accountable for its actions under international law. Economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and boycotts have been suggested as ways to push Israel towards peace negotiations. The international community must ensure that both sides are held to the same standards of human rights, international law, and justice. The role of countries like the United States, European Union, and even Russia is pivotal. They must not just serve as mediators, but take active steps to enforce resolutions passed in the United Nations. These powers have economic influence and can use trade agreements or military aid as leverage to force meaningful changes on the ground. But the global community must also support the Palestinian people by advocating for their right to self-determination and their human rights. We are not free until we are all free, as the quote goes. True global peace will only happen when justice for Palestinians is ensured alongside security for Israelis.
I agree that the global community has a role to play, but we must be careful not to let international intervention further complicate the situation. The world must help facilitate dialogue, but also respect the sovereignty of both Israel and Palestine. True peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to resolve conflict by peaceful means, said Ronald Reagan. Countries should use their diplomatic leverage to push for direct negotiations between the two sides, not impose external solutions that could lead to more resentment. The United States and the European Union have historically been partners to Israel in ensuring its security, and their role must continue to be one of balanced and unbiased mediation. If we're going to see peace, it must come from within. Israel and Palestine must negotiate directly with mutual recognition and respect. The global community can help, but it's up to the people of both nations to come together and find common ground. We cannot impose peace. We can only facilitate it.
Thank you both. The global impact of the Israel-Palestine conflict is undeniable. From political allegiances to humanitarian aid, this issue touches everyone, and its resolution will require not just the efforts of Israel and Palestine, but the entire world community. Peace is not just the responsibility of those who are directly involved, but of all of us who call this planet home. We've heard a lot today, powerful arguments, deep emotions, and insights from both perspectives. Before we conclude, Let's give each of our debaters a chance for their closing remarks. Ms. Aisha, your final thoughts?
Thank you, moderator. The Israel-Palestine conflict is not just a political issue, it's a human issue. It's about the lives of innocent children, families, and communities on both sides. But we cannot ignore that the Palestinian people have been living under occupation for decades. Every day, their basic rights, freedom of movement, access to education, healthcare, and even clean water, are restricted. Justice delayed is justice denied, and Palestinians have been denied justice for too long. We long for a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in peace. But for that to happen, there must be a commitment to justice, not just peace. Real peace can only come when there is equality, dignity, and freedom for the Palestinian people. We must not settle for a peace that is built on oppression, but one that is rooted in justice. I hope the world can finally understand that the path to peace is through recognizing the rights of the Palestinian people.
Thank you, Ms. Aisha. Let me say this, the road to peace is not easy. It requires sacrifice, compromise, and the ability to see the world through the other's eyes. I do not deny that Palestinians have suffered, but we too have lived in constant fear and loss. As I've said before, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. I believe that both Israelis and Palestinians deserve to live in peace, free from the constant threat of violence. We need security. Israel needs to feel safe from attacks, just as Palestinians need to feel safe from occupation. Only through mutual recognition and a two-state solution can we achieve lasting peace. The world must not turn a blind eye. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. As Edmund Burke said, we all must stand for justice, equality, and a future where both people can live in freedom and peace.
Thank you to both of you for your insightful and passionate arguments. As we come to the close of this important discussion, let us remember that the Israel-Palestine conflict is a deeply complex issue, but it is not beyond hope. While the road to peace may be long, the dream of a peaceful future is one shared by both Israelis and Palestinians alike. Let's leave the debate with some final thoughts. Both sides have shared their views today, and it's clear that the suffering of civilians, whether Israeli or Palestinian, it's something that we can all sympathize with. The desire for peace is universal. The way forward, however, is unclear, and while a two-state solution might offer one possibility, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. I want to leave you with a quote from Nelson Mandela. "It always seems impossible until it's done." The road ahead is challenging, but it is not impossible. And with patience, dialogue, and mutual respect, a better future is possible for everyone. Now that we discuss the history, effects, religion, global impact, and solutions, it's clear that this conflict is complicated, with no easy answers. But as we heard today, there is a universal desire for peace, a peace based on justice for both sides. And as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This debate isn't the end of the conversation. It's just the beginning of a deeper dialogue we all need to have about how we can work together toward a more peaceful and just world. Now, to our audience, I invite you to think about the solutions that have been proposed. Do you believe in a two-state solution, or do you think there are other ways to end this conflict? We encourage you to join the conversation. Your thoughts, your voice matter. Please comment below and share this debate with your friends. Let's continue discussing this vital issue, because the more we talk, the closer we get to peace. Thank you all for joining us today for this important debate on the Israel-Palestine conflict. We hope this discussion has given you a deeper understanding of the complexities of this conflict and the need for peace and justice. Remember, peace begins with understanding. Until next time, keep learning, keep talking, and let's work together for a brighter, peaceful future for all.